So we go on. Socrates seems to have done what he wanted to do at the end of Book 1. He's seemingly refuted both of Thrasymachus' claims. First, that justice is simply the advantage of the stronger. And a second, and I think more important claim, that the life of injustice is better than the life of justice. But the people around them don't think so, and it's Glaucon who, in the beginning of the book, says, well, if you really want to convince us, you're going to have to do a better job. And he puts it this way. He says there are three types of good things. There is something that we desire for its own sake, and we don't care about any of the consequences. And that's one type of good. There's a type of good where we desire something both for its own sake and for the sake of its consequences. And that's the second type of good. And the third type of good is something which we don't desire for its own sake, but only because of its consequences. And an example there he gives is physical exercise, the kind that's needed for health. We don't enjoy it, and I don't enjoy it, but we do it for the sake of its consequences, its beneficial effects on our health. And he asks Socrates, what sort of good do you think that justice is? Is it something basically that we want for its own sake, or only for the sake of its consequences? And Socrates, of course, says, well, for its own sake and its consequences. What Glaucon says, well, that's not the normal sort of view of justice. The normal view of justice is that we only want justice for the sake of its consequences. That is, we don't really want to be just. We want to have the reputation of being just, because being just is difficult. So what he challenges Socrates to do, and in a way this is the whole book, is to prove that justice is something that we should want for its own sake, not just something that we should want for the sake of its consequences. And that is really the challenge of the book. That is, if you're, and I'll ask you to evaluate the success of this book, you're really evaluating how well Socrates does in proving proving that justice is something that we should want for its own sake. And what Glaucon and his brother Adeimantus then go on to do in the bulk of Book 2 is to give arguments for the opposite side. That is, the opposite side to what Socrates wants to prove. They give a lot of arguments, which they say they don't necessarily believe, but they're the kind of things that people say. A lot of arguments that the just life is really a foolish choice. That if one is serious about one's own happiness, living a fulfilled life, and in a way being like a real man, because these guys are very macho, you always have to keep that in mind, that you won't take seriously the requirement to be just. You'll take very seriously the requirement to seem just, but not to be just. So really it's in the beginning of Book 2 that the essential question of the book is set in its definite form. That is, which is the better life, the life of justice or the life of injustice, and in which the challenge to Socrates is set in its essential form. That is, prove to us, to everyone, that justice is something that is good in itself, that is a so-called intrinsic good, and it's something that I should always want for myself, despite consequences. That is, don't argue that justice is something that I would want because of the rewards of the reputation for justice. Put that aside. Prove to me that I should want to be just no matter what. That is, to be unjust would always be the wrong choice, and being just would always be the right choice.